climate financing. Uganda needs around 3 to 4 billion US dollars to finance climate change in the next 10 years. However, the money is not coming in as expected. The recent report from the African Development Bank showed that Uganda could only raise 785 million US dollars, which is only 25% of the actual financial needs. Today on our show, we are joined by Dr. Anthony Mugere, who is going to help us understand what it means for Uganda to have its climate needs financed. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mugere.
Thank you, Fatia. Nice to be here.
Names, please, just briefly introduce yourself.
I'm Dr. Anthony Mugere. I'm a researcher, policy analyst, climate change, and as I've been introduced, I have a passion for climate change financing, among other things.
So when you talk about climate financing, what are you trying to mean, and what are we financing, to be specific?
By climate financing, you know, this is something which has been really controversial, not only at national but international levels. What do we really mean by climate finance? And I get surprised that up to now, even people at international engagements question the meaning of climate financing. But in most cases, we take the simpler version of everything. Climate financing simply means mobilizing resources, especially money, because everything rotates around money, but resources to deal with the needs as specified in the Paris Agreement of 2015 for each individual country. And for Uganda, our strategy is adaptation. So we look for finance to enable Ugandans, to enable communities, especially the vulnerable communities, women, refugees, youth, cope with the impact of climate finance. So when we talk about climate financing, we are talking about the resources, the financial resources that are needed to pay for the coping strategies, for the adaptation and mitigation strategies by the communities, especially the vulnerable communities.
You talk about climate financing, and I don't think there is the will to protect the natural ecosystem, because people are now cutting down natural forests and then planting eucalyptus, and they claim to be restoring forests. Is it the ideal way of restoring forests?
That's a good question, and there are two words in there, the will and the ideal. Certainly, as far as we are concerned as advocates of climate change and as people who are involved in research and analysis, we are equally frustrated by the fact that the political will, and I insist, it's the political will, is lacking to deal with the environmental challenges in this country. We all know the natural forests have been destroyed, the wetlands have been encroached on, and all other natural resources have been destroyed largely by the forces, the political powers that be. And that is very frustrating. We have raised this, as you know. Accord in particular was at the forefront for the Mabira and other forests, the Yei forest in West Nile and other resources. We have been at the forefront of all this. So in terms of the will, I agree, there is no political will. And we've raised this with the government. We've raised it even at international fora. But again, as you said, the ideal is not something we can achieve overnight, and as a civil society, we are involved in engagement with all stakeholders, starting with the government. And that is why you see some movement these days. You've seen the executive orders. They have issues. For example, it started with charcoal burning, and now we went to wetland conservation, and even other policies are on the way. Right now we are talking about energy transition, promoting clean energy. So these things are coming because of our increased advocacy, and we believe that with time, probably we'll have the will, the buy-in by the politicians to deal with the issues facing climate change.
When you were on the amount of finance that comes in from the well-wishers, the donors, and the government, and the impact it has caused, is it worth it? Has this money been put to great use?
Certainly not. And we've been lately, you remember, we are now preparing for pre-COP, the Dubai conference, the international conference of parties, and we've been, as civil society, we've been in this coalition trying to see where are we in terms of what we have received as a country vis-a-vis what we've done. This question has not been answered, partly because government argues that it is very difficult to track a climate fund because the government receives, the private sector receives, civil society receives funding. So if you look at the figures which all these sections, different sectors are talking about as funds for climate funding, the figures are really astronomical. We have received a lot of money in terms of dollars from very many development partners, but on the ground we have not felt it, partly because the government approach of basket funding, all the money goes to the Ministry of Finance, and then it does not go to climate financing. So we can't trace it. There was a study, I remember 2 years ago, CARE Denmark tried to sponsor a study to track climate financing, but still we were frustrated because you cannot track what you don't know where to locate what you are tracking. So we can't track, we can't locate the climate money at the moment, and therefore we can't tell where it is going and what it is doing.
Which ecosystem can be replaced apart from the wetlands that are currently regarded as industrial parks?
Certainly for us, we have been starting, our campaign has been starting with the natural forests, because we believe that this is where the much damage has been done. And also because that is where livelihood partners are. People rely on forests for firewood, for food, for medicine. So to us, the main ecosystems we are interested in are the natural forests, the protected reserves, and also the wetlands because of the catchment nature. But also now of recent we are turning our advocacy to river systems. This country was blessed with rivers. Accord in particular has been involved in the restoration of River Ruizi in western Uganda, but we believe that River Ruizi is just an extension of very many river systems. From Kagera in Tanzania, you come across all over and you across the entire country. So to us, river systems, wetlands, natural forests, and of course the protected national parks. So it goes beyond what we are seeing, but at least we have to start somewhere. And it really hurts to see that natural forests like Mabira are really being depleted, and there are no sustainable and practical steps to restore them.
Okay, what current financial mechanism is the country employing to restore climate aspect?
That's another good question. Uganda passed the National Climate Act 2021. It was assented to, the bill was assented to by the president in 2021. So we are one of the few African countries which have legislation that spells out climate financing. Act Section 4 of the Act empowers the minister to set in place the detailed guidelines for financing. So what is going on right now, even last week I was at the Ministry of Finance. The ministry has embarked on a strategy for financing, and we are going through the processes. The consultant is here. We have a draft for a strategy for financing. Within that strategy, Uganda is adopting a unit within the Ministry of Finance, the climate financing unit. And the model is that all monies that come in from within and outside goes into that unit, and then it is accessed by the different stakeholders through a formal process. So that's the model Uganda is adopting, but as you know, as I've explained, we are now in work in progress. We are setting up the strategy. We shall have the unit and then the guidelines in place. So at the moment, what we are relying on is whoever is putting in money, and we are getting fairly good money from people, although we don't know how much it is from the partners. It's going to the consolidated fund, government of Uganda. But again, accessing it, we don't know who accesses it. When they access it, that's the problem. So for the time being, we are using that model. It is still work in progress, but the good thing is that we are moving. We hope that probably by the end of this financial year, the unit will be operational, and then we shall move on.
Okay, finally from me, are there any local means that can be employed for government to be able to find climate change without depending on donors?
Exactly, that's another good one. Right from the Paris Agreement of 2015, individual countries were required to set up what we call the nationally determined conditions for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Uganda, accordingly, through consultation with the civil society and other sectors, set up a number of nationally determined conditions. Now, regarding the issue of resource mobilization, internal resource mobilization for climate fund, we set up, or the government of Uganda set up the environmental levy on vehicles which are imported in Uganda. I think the cutoff, according to the bill in Parliament, I think according to the Act, it was vehicles beyond, I think it was 2009 to pay. But of course, there is a progressive levy which is taxed on vehicles. For the issue is that tax helps finance mitigation and adaptation. But as I indicated, that internally regenerated money goes into the consolidated fund, and I can safely say it disappears in there because we don't know what it does. Every vehicle that is imported here, and if they see that it is beyond a certain year of manufacture, you pay that tax, it goes. That's just an example. There's also the other example of the private, of the people who harvest their own timber and the other forms of wood and what. Even the oil companies, it was suggested that they pay a special levy, environmental tax, and it goes to the consolidated fund. So those are some of the mechanisms. And of course, finally, there is one of mobilizing the internally. We can get some philanthropists who can give us money, the people the industrialists, the quality chemicals, these people who are making ARVs, so, and any other person. So those are the internal mechanisms we are doing. But I think to operationalize that well, let's wait for the ongoing process in the Ministry of Finance, where they are setting up the unit and the full guidelines for financing.
Your parting shots, Mr. Mugabe.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here to talk about a sensitive issue of climate finance. It is one of the topical issues in our country. It is one of the pertinent issues at the forthcoming pre-COP 28 in Dubai. My main issue is with the government. You know, climate change is one of the biggest challenges we are facing. I think, apart from security, I don't think there is anything that should come next to security in terms of prioritizing for Uganda. Climate change, climate adaptation, resilience is at the core of all these issues of agriculture, PDM, whatever we think about, education, health. As long as we are not responding to the challenges of climate change, especially through financing, we are wasting time with all the other government initiatives, including the reviews that are taking place with the NDP4.
Thank you, Dr. Mugabe, for being part of the show.
Thank you very much. I hope to be here again.